Hey guys, I've got an ARB Summit bumper here. It's a bit of a beast and a rather complicated installation. I think it's worth it. I'm going to talk a little bit about why I chose this bumper for my 2023 Bronco Badlands. This is a winch capable bumper, and here I have the Apex Badland winch from Harbor Freight. And then there's a whole discussion about the why select this winch also, but I had a lot of reasons to like this winch, and I saw it on a Black Friday deal for $479.99 plus tax, of course, and the regular price is $599.99. So even at $599, it was a pretty good deal. At $479, I just couldn't pass up on it, and I'm going to go through the install of that into the ARB bumper. And there are many pieces. There's extensive instructions on this. It comes with this whole box of parts that go along with this. I'm going to lay all this out, and because that winch and bumper are going to be heavy, certainly heavier than my factory capable bumper, which is coming off, I want to take a measurement of my ride height in the front, so that I can assess, okay, how much is my front suspension being compressed by virtue of all that extra weight. So here I am on the passenger side, right at 38 inches from the ground to the bottom of my wheel well. Of course, I'll do a before and after measurement, and if I need to, I'll look into a front leveling kit for the front. And interestingly enough, I've got a ½ inch difference side to side. This is 38.5 inches on the driver's side. So I've got the bumper out in the garage. This thing comes really well packaged for shipment. It comes on a wooden pallet, big heavy cardboard boxing around it, lots of foam wrapping on the metal, just in case you were thinking you were going to go pick that up and put it in the back of the Bronco and bring it home. Well, I have a 4-door, and this thing on its pallet and all boxed up definitely would not fit in the Bronco. So need to take the pickup or find somebody that's got a pickup. A Tacoma pickup will work just fine to go get it. So I'm going to lay out all of my parts, and I'm going to stop and start the video quite a bit, but I am going to try and outline all the important steps to do this. And it's a complicated install because I have, with the Badlands package, I have the LiDAR unit in the front, I have front camera with the washer, I have parking sensors, all of that, fog lights from the factory with my capable bumper. All of that's going to get integrated in here along with the winch before I install it. So I'm going to stop for a moment, lay out all the parts, and take a good look at what I've got ahead of me here, putting this all together. I've got everything unpackaged here, and I tell you, it's just nuts how many pieces and parts there are to this thing. This is quite amazing. All these loose nuts and bolts, all this stuff just came in one big plastic bag. So get yourself organized, get it all sorted out, and figure out what's what. Here's the pile of just the packing material. So all this stuff was actually packaged quite well inside, big heavy metal pieces, well wrapped with bubble wrap and such. But you're going to have a lot of packaging to dispose of. And if you think that's not enough, here's another whole layout here of additional parts. If you like to do 1,000-piece puzzles, you're going to be quite happy with this little project. So I want to talk for a minute. Why did I choose this bumper? They're not inexpensive. It's about an $1,800 bumper. I think I got a little discount on that, $100 or so on Black Friday. I got this through 4 Wheel Parts, so they're pretty well set up with a distribution network from their warehouses, and I did not get charged extra for any shipping on this. I just went to my local 4 Wheel Parts and picked this up. So why choose this bumper? Well, aesthetically, I kind of like the Bronco just the way it comes from the factory. I think it looks pretty on the front end, looks very attractive. I have a personal experience though. I had a Ram 3500 Cummins engine dually pickup truck, and I drove that thing for 300,000 miles. And over the course of that, I ended up unfortunately hitting a couple of animals along the way. Sometimes they just jump out in front of you from nowhere. And a year ago, right on Christmas Day, I was driving down the East Coast in the middle of the night to go see family. Very dark out there on the interstate. I was the only one out there. Out of nowhere comes a semi-truck, complete wheel and tire, just the wheel and tire rolling at me from across the median and nailed me right in the grill of my truck. I don't know what those things weigh, 100 pounds, 100 and a quarter. But when you're going down the road at 65 miles an hour and the thing hits you smack in the front of your grill, I mean, even the Dodge Ram is pretty vulnerable on the front end. And so, of course, I smashed my radiator, dumped that out. It even bent the frame a bit, and it took a while with insurance, but ultimately they totaled that truck, and it was that little incident that ended my history with what had been a very appreciated truck over the years, and I was hoping to get maybe a couple 100,000 more miles on it. But so the point is, those things do happen if you put enough miles on a vehicle. It's just random chance, and you're probably going to have some incidents. So, you know, with the Bronco, you've got, I think, a lot of fragile parts in the front end. Of course, a lot of plastic, lights, etc. You've got a bumper that comes standard, which is not all that substantial, really, when it comes to taking an impact. And you've got a lot of vulnerable parts in the front. You've got turbo intercooler, you've got radiator, of course. You've got louvered shutters that control the airflow. And so if you take a big hit on the front of a Bronco, like many other vehicles today, repairs are going to be very expensive. Depending on what the residual value is on the vehicle, could be the thing that really just totals the truck. So in my mind, I thought it was worth it to get this ARB bumper, probably the best protection you can get with the Summit bumper for the front end. It's heavy, but it is going to add some weight. I may have to do some spacers in the front to level the vehicle out, but it is winch capable. And the thing I like about ARB is they do an excellent job of engineering. I mean, you look at the way this thing is built and you see it is a masterwork of engineering. You read about how they design their bumpers. They do the work to design and test their bumpers so that your crumple zone is evaluated, so that your airbags, your factory airbags and everything should still work just fine should you get into a front end impact. And the parts, when I'm unboxing this thing, it just reeks quality. It's a very well made product, and in my mind, well worth the cost and peace of mind to have that protection that might save my vehicle, might save from a much more horrible accident. You know, an animal or debris comes flying up, comes through your windshield. This may not stop it, but it's, I think, the best protection that you could put on the front. So I'm going to set aside my normal aesthetic taste of the factory look, and I'm going to go for the heavy-duty look here, which is very functional, very practical. So I've had this for a little while now, and I've been putting off the install. It is a complicated install. You saw all the parts that are involved. So I'm going to take it step by step. I'm not going to film me doing a bunch of wrenching and stuff. I'm just going to go through all the important steps. And of course, you guys don't need to see me do the turning wrenches and things. This is just meant to be instructional and helpful, hopefully, to consider whether you want to do this type of bumper. And if you are, maybe some helpful hints of how to get it installed as easily as possible. So there's not much in specialized tools that they suggest on the instructions that you need to do this. One thing you do need is a 13/32 drill bit. It's 1/32 up from a 3/8 drill bit, so many drill bit sets won't have that. I had to go buy one. And other than that, it should be pretty straightforward, standard hand tools, torque wrench, etc. So with that, I'm going to take a break and get started on the first steps, which I think are going to be removing some trim and get going on removing the factory bumper. So these are the recovery points that come with the ARB Summit bumper. Nice bright ARB red, but I have a Bronco's Badland. I prefer that they be in something close to Badlands orange. So I found this Rust-Oleum color at my local Home Depot. It is rustic orange satin, and it's a reasonably good approximation for Badlands orange. So before I get started taking off the factory bumper, I wanted to point out a little tip here. This is the booklet of instructions, comes with the ARB Summit. It's in black and white. The pictures are a little hard to see. So do yourself a favor and go online, download the online instructions. They're in color. And of course, so once it's in your computer, you could zoom in and see a lot more detail in these photos. I'll put the link below. First thing to take the capable bumper off is to pop these plastic pieces off. You can do that with a trim tool or a screwdriver. And we want to detach the parking sensors, and notice the leg on the parking sensor. These are all going to point inboard when we put this back together. And you don't need to take the holder and everything out of here. We just need to get the parking sensor out of the holder itself. Got to pull those open a little bit. Now ARB is going to give us new pieces for this to put in the new bumper, so don't worry about those too much, but we just want the parking sensor free like that. So the next step is to get the pan off of the bottom. This is a 15 millimeter socket, and boy, if you have one of these impact ratchets, they're very handy. So the next step is to remove the bumper bolt. So here I have the bumper hanging down. I'm holding it up with some boxes temporarily. I'm working by myself here this morning, and the harness is connected over here on the driver's side. So I'm just going to snip this tie wrap here. Here is the connector for the bumper wiring harness. It's on the driver's side. I don't know about you guys, these locking automotive connectors always been my nemesis, but this one's pretty straightforward. You can just push on the one side here. And it comes apart just like that. So again, here's a close-up of the connector. Nothing on this side that you can get to. Just push down right here. It should slip right off. And the task here is to remove the fog lights from the factory capable bumper. And first this plastic piece has to come off. That's a 8 millimeter socket. And then there's some screws down here holding the fog lights in place. I'm going to use a T25 on that. So here I have the bolts out of this plastic cover piece, and yes indeed it does need to come off because at least one of these bolts on the fog lights is covered by it and you can't get to it very easily at all. Now I'm going to take the fog light out. So I'm finishing up step 8 here. I have the bumper wiring harness out. Instructions in step 8 say mark the loom so it can be installed in the correct way in the ARB bar. I don't know that that's necessary. We've got this is where the loom comes off to plug in on the driver's side. So I think pretty clear which way this needs to be oriented in the new bumper. So I don't know that it's necessary to mark the loom. So I do have the capable bumper, all the pieces and parts all back together. If somebody's interested in it, let me know. If you want to pay the shipping on it, I'd be glad to send it to you. And it's all complete except for the fog lights, of course. So I'm on to step 9, remove factory nut plates by loosening the plastic nut on the back of the chassis end plate. So this is the nut plate they're talking about. It's where the main bolts go in to hold the bumper on. And back here, behind here, you can get your fingers around, and there are 2 plastic fasteners that just hold that in place. It floats in place to get it located. So I'm just going to take those fasteners off. These little guys. Then those plates come out. Like that. And presumably we're not going to need these again, but hang on to them for now. So step 10 says remove bolts holding on factory tie-down points and set aside. If these have integrated intercooler mounts, they will be reused. Well, I don't have the factory tie-down because it's not compatible with the capable bumper. So I'm just going to leave things as is there for the moment. So step 11 is remove the factory LiDAR cover. If optioned, set this aside. They say discard the factory radar cover. It's not clear how this thing pops off. Just got to give it a good yank. It's got some clips here holding this factory cover on. So I think this is the part they say you won't need. Still on step 11, it says remove 3 screws under the cover. I think they're talking about these here, and this is 8mm. Okay, we've got a connector back here. Looks like there's just a little thumb clip here. Yeah, little thumb clip on this connector. Just push down on it like that, pop right off. So here is our LiDAR assembly. So step 12, remove 4X bolts holding the intercooler shutters onto the vehicle. Remove the connector and clips to get the harness off the shutters. So pretty clear once you get to this point. You can see there's the 4 bolts they're talking about. Again, these are 8mm bolts holding this assembly. Okay, so now removing this. Looks like you don't have to take the 4 bolts completely out. This one, they've got a slot here. Okay, so now I need to get this wiring harness out of here. So trim tool's pretty handy here for popping these things out. So this connector's just got a pop-in connector right here. So now my louver assembly is free. I'm going to get this wiring harness out of here. And my trim tool's proven kind of handy to get these things out of there. I suppose as an alternative you could just snip the tie wrap there and leave these in place on the louver assembly, but I didn't. Okay, so there is this connector on top of the louver motors here. It's a little tight in there. Okay, so this connector, this one is the one that goes to the louver motor when you remove that louver assembly. And this one is a little bit of a bugger. It's got a lock on it, this red deal, and it's got little lines on it suggesting you push on it, and it needs to come back like that to unlock. So there it is in the unlock position, and then you have the little lever right here that I'm pushing on, and the easiest way to do that is just with some needle nose pliers. You can get a good firm grip on it. Once I did that, it slipped right off the other connection on the louver motors. So here is the louver wiring harness off of the assembly, and instructions say we're going to very carefully with the razor blade or something take all this wrapping off of this because we want to separate this out and get these two apart as shown in the picture in step 13. And then we're going to rewrap it with some plastic loom or electrical tape. So here is the louver wiring harness with all the wrap off. Here's all the tape and wrapping and parts that I took off of it. And I'm going to leave this unwrapped for now. This looks like the picture in step 13. Until I see how they're going to route this, I'm not sure how I want to wrap it up again. So just holding off on that a little bit for now, moving on to the next step. So just a couple more things to note before I put this louver assembly back on. I've got this connector back on the motor for the louvers. Got the little red locking tab snapped back in place. I did destroy these connectors getting them out. There were 3. I've just used some tie wraps here to hold this in place, and I think that'll work just fine. So I've got the louver assembly bolted back in, these 4 bolts that we had taken it off with. I've got the LiDAR assembly sticking out the front through the square hole. And let me come in a little bit here, because here is the routing I now have on the LiDAR assembly. Rather than going down and coming back over across to the square hole here somewhere, I'm just coming across the top. It's not rubbing on anything but some plastic and some rubber, kind of hold it in place there, and certainly keep it away from the intercooler itself. So I'm ready to move on to the next step. So this is step 15. We're going to remove the radiator cover, and trim tool works great here. Pop up all these little plastic connectors without damaging them. And now we have the radiator cover off. There's 4 bolts here on the fascia, just the front grille, and that's all we want to loosen so we can get to the camera and the washer. So here is the electrical connector that goes to the camera, and it looks like we just pinch this with some needle nose and we can slide that right off of there. Okay, so now that I have the fascia loose, I've got to detach my lines here, both the washer line and the camera line. Alright, now we can work on things a little better. And it looks like I need to snip this little holder here so that I can get this camera line routed as far down as they'd like. Okay, so after snipping the connector here that was holding the two together, I was able to get enough length on the coax line so that now I've got it hanging out from under the light like shown in the picture, and I think I need to go below this lower fascia with this as well. Here's an update. I've had a little bit of a frustrating time here. So the next step was to get the rear connectors, off of the back of the headlights, and they're hard to get to, and ARB instructions say take the wheel well liner, at least 4 fasteners in the front, drop it down so you can get your hand up in there, and it has a little locking tab, of course, on that headlight connector. And somebody hates fat paw guys like me because I could get my fingers on it, but I just couldn't get enough grip on it to get it loose. So what I did is let's talk about these fasteners. So these are some of the fasteners that come out of the fender well liner, and of course, you know, they have a little Phillips head. Okay, you stick a Phillips head screwdriver in there and turn it and it should back out, right? Well, they don't. It looks like they're designed to, but they don't. And so it just spins and spins and spins and you can't get it out. So I ended up taking my trim tool and just brute force yanking it from under the big shoulder here because I couldn't get the top of the connector to pop up. There was no way to get any grip on that. Turning on it with a Phillips screwdriver just did not back out, and that was on several of them. So maybe I'm doing something wrong. Let me know in the comments if you got a better way to do that. Anyway, when I pull the connector with some force to pop it out, you end up breaking these, and at this point it's not going to work anywhere close to as intended, and I don't like that too much. So what I did is I abandoned the wheel well method of getting to that headlight connector, and I just gave up on that and looked at the procedure to remove the headlight from the front, since I already had the front grille off and was most of the way there. The only additional piece I had to remove was that lower thin narrow fascia trim, and to get that off you do have to take the fender flares off, but they're easy to take off. There's 5 little levers under there. You turn them down and just pop that right off, and the fender flare comes off. And then you're able to pop the end of the narrow fascia off the end here. And the reason you have to remove that is because one of the screws on the headlight down here is right behind that fascia and you can't get to it. So to take the headlight out, you've got an 8mm bolt head here, you've got a 10mm here, a 10mm head here, and a Christmas tree fastener that does pry right out and remains reusable with the trim tool. So pulling the headlight out, I was of course able to get to the connector on the back of it much easier. And also we're going to tap into some of the wiring in that headlight connector harness. That's the whole idea here, right? And we're going to attach a little harness that comes with the ARB kit for the clearance light. So this is a combination light. It's got a turn signal and a clearance light in it. Now, another beef I had with the instructions is they're pretty out of date, and they show you actually cutting wires and soldering, and right behind that headlight connector in the harness. Very messy, even if you're good at soldering and such. The kit does come with crimp-on connectors that you can tap into those pretty easily. So I was able to do that, and of course, before I buttoned everything else up, I plugged in one of the lights so that I could check the turn signal and the clearance, make sure that the wiring was correct. So especially if you're a big paw guy like me, easiest thing is don't mess around with the fender well, the felt liner, and those stupid little plastic connectors that break. Just pull the headlight out and do it that way. It'd be a lot simpler. So with that, I'm going to go and do the driver's side. I've taken out the 8mm head bolt here. There's 2 10s up here and the Christmas tree connector. And there is a little pop connector here on the inboard side of the headlight. So you do got to give it a little tug, grip like that and that, and pop it right out. But as you can see, now I have great access to this connector. And here's what I could not get my hand up there enough to be able to pull that off, and here I'm able to do it with one hand. So I'm going to take the light away, and then I can do my splicing into the connector harness just behind the connector. So one thing I did notice on the passenger side, I'll make a note of this too, is you have the color coding here, and for the indicator conductor, the green wire from the ARB harness is going to go to the yellow wire with white stripe. There were actually 2 yellow wires. It was hard to tell. They both had stripes. They looked like they could have been white. One was a smaller gauge, one was a bigger gauge. So I took a guess. It was the one with the bigger gauge that matched the gauge of the other ones. And yes, indeed, that was the correct one. So on the passenger side, if you see 2 yellow wires look like they have a white stripe, pick the larger one. I have the crimped on connectors, the taps just behind the headlight connector. I don't really care for these connectors a whole lot. I mean, they can nick or even cut through some of the strands of your wire. They're not really all that water and corrosion proof and such, but I'm going to go ahead and use them. It's certainly better than soldering and taping things up. And if I ever have trouble with these clearance lights, this is the first place I'm going to look to troubleshoot. So I've got all that wired up, and of course, before I put the headlight back in, button things up, I check my clearance and turn signals, make sure they work. So now I've got both sides done, and I'm ready to put the headlight back in and hopefully move on. So now I'm on to step 30, and this is the most mechanically challenging part of this whole installation, in my opinion. So step 30 says loosen the top intercooler mount plate. This is a tight area to get tools into. Remove bolts and set aside. So I have removed the bolt. It actually goes in this hole here right at the end of the screwdriver. And this is what the bolt looks like. And this is the 6mm spacer that comes in the ARB parts that we're going to put under this. So for starters, it is just extremely difficult to get a tool into here and get that bolt undone. The thing that worked for me was a 14mm ratcheting box wrench. That was the only tool I had that I could really effectively get that bolt out. So first thing is to get the bolt out, and then I want to comment on the assembly of what's going to go in there. So this is the driver's side. I've already installed the passenger side. 3 pieces here that are going to bolt together. This plate here goes on top of the frame rail, and the bolt that we took out is going to go back in there, and then these are going to bolt to the sides of the frame rail just behind the front horn mounting plates where we're going to bolt the bumper to. So a couple of tips here. I had a really hard time trying to get this plate in there where it needs to go, and then trying to reach in and get this bolt in the hole and threaded to go back in place. And the way this is going to get installed, it's going to have the OEM washer, which is captive, on top, and the 6mm spacer is going to go underneath like that. I found it nearly impossible to hold that plate in place and reach way back in there and try and get this bolt in there with the spacer, the 6mm spacer underneath. What I did find to work was go ahead and put the bolt back in with the spacer now on the bolt, and then you can get the plate in there like this, and they have this bigger opening here, so with the bolt threaded into its location, you can get this over it and then slide that like that. So it's keyed to work like that, and it actually it works pretty good once you figure out that's the way to do it. They don't really tell you that, but it seems a little intuitive once you study how this part is made as the solution, but it's sure wasted a lot of time getting to that point. So once you get that installed, and these 2 brackets, my left and right hands here, on both sides of the frame, there is this crush tube spacer that goes in between to bolt these 2 sides together. It goes through the frame horn and through these holes here where my fingers are down here. And so for this whole cross piece, this is the stack up that they want you to use. So you have the bolt that goes through the 2 brackets, through the frame. They've got 2 locks on here and 2 spacers, and the spacer goes between the bracket and the frame rails, right there where my fingers is. That's where the brackets, the side brackets, are going to go. I had a little bit of an issue here. These side brackets also have the keyed hole. Not as critical to have them here as on that top bolt, but when you put the lock washer on there like that, I just don't like that this does not have surface area for that split washer to have full contact and do its job of preventing this thing from coming loose. So I went to my Ace Hardware and got some flat washers, and this is how that would work. I'll show this on the inside one. So when you mount this up, now you have that flat washer, and the split washer has full face contact, better able to do its job. So I put these flat washers on both sides, and then on this other side we have the 6mm spacer, we have the tube spacer. This comes through the hole in the frame. Then we have this spacer on the outboard side, then the matching bracket with the 6mm spacer between the bracket and the frame, and then here is the flat washer that I'm adding. So here's the stack up that I ended up with. On the head of the bolt side, we've got a split washer, the flat washer I've added, and the bracket goes in here. Over here we're going to have the 6mm spacer, then the bracket, another flat washer I've added. And I noticed when all that's in place with the brackets, I don't get full thread engagement on this nylock nut. So since it is a nylock, I'm doing away with that split washer on the nut side so that I get full engagement on the nylock, because I want to see some threads coming all the way through the nylock for the nylock to do its job. So there's my stack up. Now I'm going to put all these parts on the truck. So I'm on step 35, and this is where we attach, at least temporarily, these backing plates, these shim plates, I would call them, that we're going to use when we mount the bumper. And we have to drill a fourth hole here because we've got the 3 here from the factory bumper goes through the factory horn bracket, but ARB has you drill a 4th one, and we'll put a 4th hole here. Now, some considerations on this. One, I'm a little concerned about the clearance of my winch housing to my lower fascia, and so I wanted to mount the bumper low. However, there are some trade-offs with that. You've got a fold here, a big rounded edge here behind here where this bracket is going to fit, and then this is the slotted hole where that 4th bolt is going to go. There's not a lot of room here, so we're going to have to put this flanged serrated nut behind there when we mount the bumper, and so we don't want to make this hole any bigger and thin this area out here. So it's kind of important that we hit this slotted hole accurately, but yet there's a lot of leeway on these plates up and down vertically where they could fit. So I kind of compromised here, and of course I wanted to get both sides set to the same height as close as I could get. So what I settled on was a measurement from the top of the square frame tubing here to the bottom of this cutout in the backing plate, in the shim plate, and I have it at 5/16 of a gap from the top of the horn here to the bottom of this cutout here. So hopefully that will I will still have clearance for my winch without cutting this fascia, but I wanted to make sure that I had this hole located accurately because there's so much play in this opening where this thing could fit. You could be way off the mark, so it's very important to take your time here, bolt it up temporarily, and mark it accordingly. So I'm ready to drill the hole here. I've already done the other side, and that will take me through steps 35 through 37. So there's 4 of these M6 cage nuts. This is step 38. There's some square holes here in the bottom. They need to be installed with the nut on the inside. You just push on them like that, maybe with some needle nose. They snap right in place. I've got the other one over there. 2 more go over here on the other side. So here's another little tip. I have already had the winch in here as per step 41, 42, even had it torqued down. And the next step was to put the fair lead on. And of course, there's some variability in these things, but when I put this on there with the winch in place, there is just not enough room, again, a big paw guy like me especially, to get behind this and put on a flat washer and a lock washer and a nut. So do yourself a favor, skip ahead to step 43, put your fair lead on first. These are stainless parts too, so I should put some anti-seize on here. I do not have any currently available, so I'm just going to snug these up gently for now to avoid any galling. And it's certainly easier to get a wrench on the back of this to back it up without that winch in place. I don't know why they give that to you in that order of steps. This winch is about the same size and shape as a Warn Xeon, and so I think you'd have the same issues with a Warn. It is a 19mm wrench to back it up, and I'm using a 5/16 Allen head on my drive head. Just a couple tips on assembling this. The first piece of the bracket, the smaller one, goes bolted to the bumper itself. Of course, with the M6x20s, I put a flat washer on the face of it because it's in an oval slot there. And then on the back side, I did not put a flat washer because we're using these flange washers which have some bite to them. I think using a washer with this kind of defeats the purpose of it. So you want that to bite into the metal, keep it from rotating. If there's a washer there, I think it could still rotate. So the front piece assembles very similarly. There's this plastic packer that goes in between the two. So again, I've got flat washer on the outside, nut on the inside, packer in the middle, and you can snug that down, control whatever tightness you want. Obviously you want this to stay up when you're using your winch, and you can control the tension on that, just how tight you tighten those bolts. So the other thing is these plastic pieces snap in for screws that of course will hold your license plate on there. I'm on steps 56 through 58 where we cut this grill panel. I think this is kind of brilliant on the part of ARB that they get multiple uses out of this. Of course, they don't design a Summit bumper from the ground up every time they do one for a different vehicle. And so this comes with different lengths, and in very fine print here it's marked. And for the Bronco, we're to cut this at the 850 millimeter mark. So I've cut both ends of this using an oscillating tool. Actually worked pretty good. And one other thing I've done is with an angle sander, I've radiused off the back corners of these a little bit, making sure I'm actually on the back corner because it fits in here like this with this little higher section in the middle, and this is the front where we can open the doors. But I've radiused this off a little bit. Just it fits a little bit better in these pockets where we have some welds in place, and just fits nice and tight against the backing plate here. So I think the next step is we've got a little bracket we need to put in here, and then we're going to attach this. Okay, so in step 59, I've used M6 by 20 bolts to attach these brackets. The description's a little bit off. It looks like there might be only one bracket, but there's two brackets. One goes on each side of the license plate frame. And then we've got 6 of these plastic bushings go in the square holes here on the brackets and on both ends. Okay, so now I'm going to fasten the front grille. There is a baggie, so these parts are segregated, but those 2 plates are used out at the end with the longer screws in the bag, and the 2 short screws go here in the middle. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. Number 4 Phillips seems to be the ticket for that. These plates appear to be stainless, so that's nice. So one thing I really like about this design, it's got these doors open up. I can reach right in, get my clutch handle here and turn it, and I think that's going to work really well. Keeps it all tucked out of the way, kind of hidden away. So I'm on step 64, and I've already done the passenger side, and a couple learnings here. One, the pieces involved. We've got this rear buffer slides on from the rear to the front, got the slot, and we have the front buffer that's going to go up here like this. These two mate together. There is a very narrow slot in here. You need to check the fit on this. 2 did not fit together particularly easy without a little bit of trimming on the passenger side. So we get those to fit well. Another thing to note is step 65 says that this rear buffer is going to be attached with 4 screws from the bottom, screws with plastic washers on them, and it does indeed have 4 bosses on the bottom to screw into, but there are only 2 holes drilled on the inboard side, and unless you want to figure out where the other 2 holes go and go drilling on it, then there will only be 2 screws, not 4 screws, holding this piece on. I think it'll be okay, but as you can see when I come around the other side here, there are no holes here, and there should be 2 holes here if the intention was to really use 4 screws and utilize all 4 bosses on this rear buffer. But first, we've got these rubber pieces to put on. It's pretty straightforward. They just slide on like so. They do have a very flexible little lip on them. When you're putting the rear buffer and the front buffer together, you may have some difficulty with this trying to fold under itself. So you have to be careful that it lays flat like it's supposed to when everything's in place. So the rear buffer slides on with the slot from the rear. You can let it stick out all the way to the front. I'm going to come around the other side here, put the front buffer on. Okay, so I have those 2 fit together as well as I think they're going to fit. It's about the same as the passenger side. There's a little groove gap showing here. I think that's okay, it's intentional. And now we're just going to push it back to get the front buffer in place where it's supposed to be. So now I'm going to go underneath, put 2 screws in the rear buffer from the bottom. Then on the front buffer, there's actually 2 clips that you use and then screws with cup washers. So I'm going to pause the video and do that now. Okay, so I finished with the left-hand side, driver's side on the front buffer, rear buffer. I ain't gonna lie, I had a little fussing to do with the tongue that fits in the slot here up front and getting that to fit. They fit pretty good when they're just out in free space in your two hands. You can fit those two pieces and the tongue in the slot pretty easily. But when you get them on the bumper, things start distorting a bit and becomes a little bit more challenging. So anyway, I owe a few quarters to the swear jar here on that. But I did get it done, and here we see on the back of the front buffer, we got the two wedges on the outside. We got the cup washers here and here on the inboard side of the front buffer. And we've got screws and washers up here on top for the rear buffer. And again, no screws over here because no holes. This is step 67 in the main manual. This is to install the turn indicator combination lamp in the bumper. And the bracket attaches with some hardware, pretty straightforward. A couple things to note here. And this actually comes as a kit with its own instructions. And there's an important piece to remember here is that this is a combination. So there's some yellow LEDs in here, there's some white LEDs. Of course, you want them facing in the right direction. You want both sides to match. There is an arrow on the gray part of the housing, and that is supposed to face outboard. So I need to put this one in this way. We've got these plastic grommets to put in. I am on step 68 of the main manual. This is installing the housings that will hold the factory fog lights in place. There's a separate kit with separate instructions that comes along with this. And the first step is to attach this top bracket kind of loosely. One thing you'll note on here is the four brackets, left and right, upper and lower. They have different part numbers. The ones for the right hand side end with a R in the part number. The ones on the left or end with a L, so a little easier to tell them apart. So they tell you to attach the top one loosely at first and install this from the outside. Something like that. And now I can install the bottom one. I'm going to go ahead and snug all these down now. So I have the brackets snugged down. The housing is firmly in place, and these are my OEM fog lights. I've mounted them in these aluminum brackets that come in the ARB kit, and the mounting is pretty straightforward, just a Allen head bolt with a nylock on it. And the two aluminum brackets are unique left and right as well. Once you have the housings in place, you can tell which one is which on these aluminum ones once you realize how these fit in. That they will go something like that. There's three screws here, here, and here that will hold this in. These two are slotted, so we can start these two screws, hang the light in place, add the third screw, cinch it all down, we should be good to go. Okay, so the fog lights are mounted. And if we come around to the front, look at it from this side, I notice there's two little notches here and a brass threaded boss right here. And sure enough, in the instructions there is an optional clear cover that you can get that fits this, and I will leave the part number in the video notes below. I found them online pretty easily, about 50 bucks a pair. So I'm on step 72 now, where we have this LiDAR bracket that is going to mount here. It goes this way. 4 bolts, 2 at the bottom, 2 at the top. And I ran into a bit of a problem on this one because the bracket was not shaped such that the LiDAR unit would bolt up in there in a reasonable way. Let's see, it goes this way, you can see right here. And before I bent this thing, I could either get the 2 bolts in up here and have a gap down here at the bottom for this 3rd bolt, or I could bolt this one and then I'd have a gap up there. So the bracket is not formed correctly, and I actually got on the phone with ARB support and told them my situation. They didn't really offer to send me a new bracket, and I was hoping that really wasn't the solution anyway, because my truck's not drivable without a bumper until I get all this back together. And if I had to sit and wait for them to send me a new part, well, this is one I think you'd have to have the bumper off the vehicle, take the winch out of the bumper, and be able to play with this bracket. So anyway, I discussed with them doing some bending modification on this bracket, and now we can see that this is these 2 surfaces are flush here, I'm flush here, so this is going to bolt together just fine. The other issue I had was that when I lined up here with the 4 bolts that mount to the bumper itself, that some of the bolt holes didn't line up very well. I couldn't get the bolts in, and so I did a little additional bending on that. So of course I don't have any sophisticated tools available in this particular garage at the moment, and I ended up using just vice grips and a hammer, and got this thing where it will bolt up both to the LiDAR unit and bolt up to the bumper just fine. And of course you damage the paint in doing that, gripping things with vice grips and beating on them with a hammer. So there's an extra step of retouching the paint, the black paint, so that I don't have any bare metal showing on this bracket that's going to start to rust. So a couple other notes on this part of the process. The LiDAR unit itself, it says set aside if dropped. So these things I think are subject to damage if you drop them. It's a odd choice of words, set aside if dropped. You'd think they'd say something a little more emphatic, like do not use if dropped, or easily damage if dropped, that kind of thing. But anyway, so you want to be careful handling this and make sure that you don't drop it and damage it. And speaking of that, the ARB instructions have you go ahead and mount this thing up before you cut the opening in this plastic grill. And I did not like that idea, because I thought with my oscillating tool it would be very easy to slip and do some damage to the front of the LiDAR face. So I test fitted it up, marked where I wanted to cut, and then cut with my oscillating tool with the LiDAR not in place so as not to damage it. A couple of pet peeves there. One, the part quality on this bracket, and then I think the sequence of steps that they give. Again, I don't care for it. Just use common sense and figure out a couple steps ahead if there's something you should do first before mounting something in place. So I'm going to go ahead and put this together, get it mounted up, check my opening, make sure I don't want to do any more trimming there, and then that will be done. So I'm on step 74, which is with the camera and the washer. And first off, this cover shroud that came on the Bronco OEM, you're not going to reuse that. You have to pop that off. Camera pops out. It's actually a 2-piece bracket, piece that comes along the back here and the piece on the front, and the camera gets kind of sandwiched in between, and those 2 brackets are held together with 2 M6 by 20 millimeter bolts there, and it looks like this is ready to go bolt into the bumper. Okay, I have the plastic cover popped on. I had to shift it a little further to the left. I didn't want to block any of the camera here. And that looks pretty good. This is step 78, mounting of the recovery points, and they slide in from the front, and they have 3 bolts. I think there's only one way they can go, and the bolts have to go from the inboard side to the outside because of this angle here. There's just not enough room to get the bolt inserted in the hole. So the bolt heads have to be on the inboard side, flange nuts on the outside. Impact Ratchet did a great job just cinching these down in short order. I'll come around and show you the front. Did them up in Badlands orange, or close approximation. So I've just finished step 79, which is bolting these 2 lower pan brackets onto the bottom of the bumper. Installing those is pretty straightforward. Step 80 is to install in the outer 2 parking sensors new housings that come with the ARB kit. And there's a little subtlety here that these parts are keyed. As you see in the hole, there are 4 little notches, and on the mating part, there's molded in at each quadrant, there is a little nub to key in those slots. Something that's not particularly obvious until you struggle a little bit with which way this gets oriented is the one at the top is a little bit bigger, and sure enough, when I look at the top and bottom holes, the north and south slots are slightly bigger than the east and west slots. And if you look at this housing with the north nub facing up, you can see that it's got a little bit of angle to it. So they've angled these down a little bit. So there clearly is one correct way to put these in, and when you got it, you will feel it, because it just goes very smoothly right into place, very flush all around. Don't have to push on it too much. So just a little subtlety there on those. Of course, if you don't have parking sensors, there are blank plugs that you'll put here on the outboard parking sensor hole locations. The inner hole locations, we're going to use those later to bolt the bumper to the truck. So those are left out for now. So here we are on the inside of the bumper, and there's a piece that snaps on to the bezel that we put in from the front. And you do have to watch the orientation on this. And when you do push it on, you will hear rather subtle 2 clicks when it is snapped into place. And it's quite secure if you've got it snapped in there correctly. So here I'm just doing a little tidying up of the wiring I've installed in the bumper. We've got the fog light and the outboard parking sensor installed on the passenger side. And I've routed this cable over and across the top. And there is a little slack in the cable. It's a little bit longer than it needs to be. I suggest that you have that extra length coming out over in this direction on the driver's side, because you've got this lead, you've got to reach way up and connect back to the truck, and it looks like it might be a little tight on length. So I'm just going to go ahead and keep this wiring harness shifted over to the left to the driver's side as much as I can before I tie it down. So now I have the winch mounted, and I wanted to give an update about the hardware, the bolts, the 4 bolts that the winch mounts with. And they've got the square nuts, of course, 4 of them that fit inside the casing of the winch. It was really difficult to get the bolts that come with the winch to start, and it turns out they were just a little bit short. You could struggle and get them started, but then when I torqued them down, I did not have any thread sticking up above the nut. In fact, it was a couple threads below, and so I knew that I was not going to get the strength that is intended out of those bolts without the full thread engagement. So I found some cap screws that are 35 millimeters long instead of 30 millimeters long. And these cap screws came actually with a class 12.9 rating, even a beefier rating than the 8.8 grade bolts that come with the winch. So hopefully you can see it in this picture, but I do have some thread sticking up just above the nut there. I kind of like that a lot better. I asked ChatGPT about the shear strength of the 8.8 rated bolts versus the class 12.9, and the difference about 2,000 pounds per bolt. So I've got about 8,000 pounds more additional strength by having the 12.9 bolts. The 8.8s probably were fine. It's just the ones that came with the winch were a little too short. So now I have everything assembled to the winch that needs to be. You'll notice I've got the winch on here. It's torqued down. And you may also notice that the solenoid housing that was on top of the winch, I have removed it because I had some interference and it was just a very tight fit. And fortunately, the Harbor Freight Badlands winch comes prepared for that contingency, and they allow for you to easily remove the solenoid box. And I'm going to have to run 3 cables from here back over to here. And I think I've got plenty of clearance. I should be able to do that once the bumper is on the vehicle. So the Badlands winch does come with this bracket that this solenoid box fits on, and I think I can make a very simple plate. We've got a spot in the Bronco on the passenger side near the fender well where there's a place where this whole thing kind of fits in that space rather nicely. So the only real trade-off is I don't really like this being under hood and subject to underhood heat, but apparently it's a pretty common practice. And the cool thing about this winch from Harbor Freight is they give you all the pieces, parts, and instructions to mount this thing remotely. I like that a lot. I like the way the winch fits in here now. ARB does give you this cover which can cover the winch area, and I think now without that solenoid housing in place, I can use this and give a little extra protection to the elements for the winch and my synthetic line. So that's about it for this step. I'm just going to double check the bracket bolts, make sure they're fully torqued down on the Bronco, and then I'm going to be ready to test fit this up. Now I've got the bumper all mounted up. I didn't record actually fitting the bumper up. It's pretty straightforward. I was working by myself, and I want to show this jack actually, which I got from Harbor Freight, and it has an available cross beam that you can put on it. And I just laid a piece of plywood across there and had the bumper on top of that. You got to be careful, keep everything balanced carefully, but that enabled me to put this bumper on solo without any assistance. Even if you have some help to put the bumper on, I think you could really use something like this to hold it in place. It does take a little while to get everything lined up and get the bolts in and threaded. So here's a view from inside the driver's side fender well, looking forward to where the bumper is bolted up. I used 2 of the ARB shims here. There's a possibility of using up to 4 on each side, and I found that they weren't necessary, and the more of them you try to use to space the bumper further forward, the more difficult it is to get everything lined up and get those bolts started, all these mounting bolts. And also on the driver's side, here is that wiring harness for the turn signals and the parking sensors. This is the OEM wiring harness where it plugs back in on the driver's side. And you really do need as much length on this as you can. So when you're putting this harness into the bumper, pre-assembling it before you put it on the truck, do make sure that you shift this harness as far to the driver's side as you can so that you have a little bit of slack in this thing. So the reason for those up to 4 shims, I think there's 2 reasons for them really. One is to space the bumper forward enough that you have appropriate spacing between the bumper and your fender flare, and that's what I've got. You just want to match that up both sides as best as you can. And I think the other reason for the shims perhaps is to allow additional clearance for the winch. If you have the control box for the winch on top of here, it can be pretty tight here. The instructions give some steps for cutting this lower fascia if you have an interference with your winch, and I didn't really want to do that, and it was a tight fit anyway. That's another reason why I went with doing a remote mount on my winch control box. And this is the Harbor Freight winch, but a Warn Xeon winch also has provision to do a remote mount on the control box. You have to buy another kit to do that, and the Badland winch comes with all the pieces and parts that you need to do that already included. So I think for where I am going to put the winch control box under the hood, I'm probably going to have to make some longer cables for that, but I can access the terminal blocks here under this cover when it comes time to install those cables. So for now, the winch is just mounted up. I don't have the electrical complete on it, and I need to make a bracket plate to fit under the hood. So I'll do a whole new video on just the winch install. So another couple of comments while I'm here. This is the housing for the louvers for, I believe it's the intercooler air intake. And if you do install a winch, and this is probably a problem on many winch bumpers, but you're really blocking a lot of airflow to that area back there just by virtue of having the winch. I don't know if that's going to be an issue. I think if it was a significant issue, it'd probably be people noting that already. But I think, you know, if you're going to do extended high RPM, really get into the turbo boost and run things kind of hot for extended period of time, that could be an issue for you. So some of the last steps of putting these plates on the bottom, I didn't record those, but they're pretty straightforward. Now, I have a factory metal skid plate in the front. The instructions only cover mounting the plastic version of this plate, but it's pretty straightforward, pretty easy to understand. There's this middle piece that goes in, and then you have these wing pieces on both sides, and all of that seems to bolt up quite nicely, actually. One other bit of feedback is these recovery points, and I like them. They're plenty beefy. I think they're going to work just fine. One thing I don't like about them is they have this sharp edge in here, which if you use a soft shackle, I'd be hesitant to just put a soft shackle in here across that sharp edge. So it would be nice to have that rounded so that you could just throw a soft shackle on there and not have to worry about it. A couple of other things. I did notice that with my camera that where it's positioned, I do get a view of this top edge of the license plate. So I'm going to look at using the Ford OEM housing for this and maybe surface mounting it on the front. So bring that forward a little bit so I don't have that view of the top of my license plate frame. But some other things that I like here, we've got great access here to reach in, grab your clutch handle. You've got access here to get inside. After the bumper is bolted up, we have to put the inboard parking sensors in place and just some plastic plugs here for the bottom bolt holes. Also up front here, I like that you can adjust the tension on these bolts on the fold-up license plate frame. Just fold it right up out of the way. I think that's a great setup, and certainly ARB has done a good job of solving the integration issues of what do we do about a license plate location that is not blocking anything, and the LiDAR cover, the camera integration, the parking sensor integration. I think they did a really good job on all of that. So let's talk about the added weight for a moment. So I added up the figures for the capable bumper and the associated hardware. I came up with about 46 pounds. I also weighed the ARB bumper, the winch, and all the new stuff going on the truck. That came up to 231 pounds. So net difference, I've added 185 pounds to the front of the truck. That would be a bit more, of course, if I had steel cable on my winch. So synthetic cable, another positive for that, much lower weight. If I take some measurements to my fender flares, I got just over 37.5 on the passenger side, so about a ½ inch lower than I was before I put the bumper on. And if I look over on the driver's side, now I've got just over 37.5 there as well, so they're about even, about ½ to 1 inch lower than I measured before. And I've done this a couple times. I think there's some variability every time I park after I've been driving. Seems to be quarter to a ½ inch of variability just in doing this measurement. So take that for what it's worth, but fair to say that adding the bumper and the winch has brought the front end down maybe a ½ inch, maybe 3/4 of an inch at the most. So here's a side view, and when you look at it, yeah, you can see, even with the stock vehicle, that the front is a little bit lower. which is a reason why a lot of people put the 1-inch or so leveling kits on the front, even on a stock vehicle. So a little bit more of that lean down in the front with the bumper. I'm going to drive it for a while and see how I like that. So I don't have much weight in the back of it right now. I think loaded down for a longer extended trip, I'm going to be down in the back a little bit more than in the front. So I'm going to hold off and see how things look when I've got full load for an extended off-road trip, and see what it looks like then. So for final impressions, I'm going to do a little grading here. I'd say for the overall design of the bumper itself, definitely an A+. I think this thing is very well engineered, very well thought out. For the packaging and the shipping protection, another A+ there. As far as the manufacturing quality, the bumper fab itself, I think, again, A+ there. Overall fit and finish is top-notch. A couple of manufacturing things I would take off a little bit for, though, is not having the 4 holes drilled for these plastic buffer pieces. So mine have just 2 of the 4 screws holding these on. They should do a manufacturing change, make sure that there's 4 holes provided in the correct places. Another manufacturing quality issue, that LiDAR bracket that I did a segment on and not having it fit. I don't know if I got one that was just malformed or if they were all coming like the one that I received, but you shouldn't have to bend and twist and beat on a bracket like that to get it to fit. That was the one standout as far as part quality where something was amiss. As far as the instructions go, I think they're long overdue for an update. There's a bunch of minor typos and updates that should be remedied in the instructions. The ones I got were published in November of 2021. And there are a number of little things easy enough to figure out, like, you know, the LiDAR wiring harness was called out as the camera harness. Something like that, pretty minor, easy to figure out. But as far as the instructions go, I think a bigger miss, a pretty substantial miss, is trying to have you put the winch in too soon and the fair lead on after the winch is installed. I think that's totally out of order there. You should install the winch after pretty much everything else is in place. It certainly make it a lot easier getting the camera and the LiDAR and everything else installed in there. And you should put the fair lead on, bolt that up before you actually install the winch. And those can be the last things to go on before the whole bumper is ready to go on the truck. So as far as the overall instructions go, I think that was a miss. There's other things in the instructions, like they don't cover the reinstallation of the factory metal skid plate, only the plastic stone guard if that's what you have. Again, that's pretty minor, easy enough to figure out. As far as suggested improvements, I think a plug-in wiring harness to use behind the headlights certainly would be better than soldering, certainly would be better than those crimp-on wire taps. They could provide the appropriate connector where you could just pull the factory harness off the back of the headlight and plug in provided wiring harness. Would certainly be a lot easier. So my final impressions, I really like the look of this. I thought it might look like too much on the front end, but I think for what it is and what it does, protection that it brings to the front end, I think it does an excellent job both physically and aesthetically. So would I do this again? And my answer is yes, although you have to be prepared. Either have this professionally installed by someone who maybe has experience with these, or just prepared to take your time, have your patience tested a few times with doing it yourself. Keep in mind that once the factory bumper is off the truck, you really can't drive legally until you get the new bumper installed. Now, this took me over the course of several days. Of course, recording video slowed me down quite a bit, but I think this is certainly more than an afternoon project. If you have any installation tips or suggestions, let us know what you think. Please share in the comments. I have a separate review for my aux beam lights that I added. That's already been posted, along with a review of my 42-inch light bar from Harbor Freight as well. I'm very pleased with all those lighting choices, and that is discussed in the other video that I do a nighttime test and a current measurement test on the Harbor Freight light bar. So that's it for this video. If you like this content, please give me a like and a subscribe. That'll encourage me to make some more videos and try to grow this channel. Take care, everybody. We'll see you on the next one.